I've done several videos on this channel over the past year talking about how much the auto industry is in trouble right now when it comes to all of the cars sitting on the dealer lots. It's been very difficult for these dealerships to get rid of these cars because the prices are too high, and interest rates to borrow to buy these cars are also quite high. And when you combine that with an ever increasing cost of living and the inflation report continuing to go up, which we will talk about later in this video, it doesn't make it very easy for people to buy cars. But apparently, just because JP Morgan says so, then everybody now has enough money to pay cash for these cars. Before we go over this story, I just want to give my quick input and opinion on this thing real quick, which is this. I feel like we're getting to a point in the economy where a lot of these businesses and economists and big banks have to start making up stories so that way they can start believing their own lies about how good things really are. And once we dive into the data on this, I think you will agree with me. And by the way, anybody curious, I am walking through McNears Beach State Park in San Rafael, California. So according to JP Morgan, they're saying there is little sign that high car prices at the dealership lots are weighing heavily on overall sales trends. And despite the fact that we've had above trend inflation for more than 3 years now, household finances are still in solid shape. Now, raise your hand if you agree with just that statement right there. Never mind the car market, let's just talk about real world economics here. Despite above trend inflation, the average household is still in good shape. Well, pretty much everything that we talk about and all these anecdotes I find out there say otherwise. But let's keep going. JP Morgan also says that consumers' cash buffers are still strong and credit profiles are still healthy, and that hasn't changed. And even though we had this terrible downward revisions with the latest jobs report, that's not a big deal either. And unemployment still remaining steady at 4.2%. They even go as far here to say that relatively few families are being forced by a job loss to cut back on spending. Well, I'm sorry, JP Morgan, but I feel like everything that I'm reading right now is a complete lie, or at the very least, an omission about what's really going on. Every other story that I'm able to uncover week after week points against the complete opposite happening. Now, JP Morgan highlights that one of the signs of this strong consumer position right now is that more consumers are bypassing expensive financing rates by paying for vehicles with cash. Now, on the surface, that's a good thing. That's what I encourage people here to do on the channel. You should be buying a car with cash and avoid having that car payment, because that is going to drag down your monthly finances. They say about a third of used vehicle sales have been all cash, and about a fifth of brand new vehicle sales have been all cash, which is the highest share than we've seen in more than a year. Now, the first thing I gather from this is that this is just like the housing market, guys. The housing market is still near all-time high prices, right? Does that mean that everybody's rich and everybody's able to buy a house, even though about 30% of all homes today are sold to all cash buyers? Does that mean the economy and the consumer is doing well? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that there is an affluent group of people out there who, despite the current economic conditions, are still doing very well and can afford to purchase at today's prices. And I would gather that is probably the same thing that we're seeing right now in the car market. So when I hear stories like this, it seems like these economists and banks and government institutions are just digging for any glimmer of hope. And we'll see that same sentiment in the latest CPI report as well, that we'll go over in a little bit here. And I think that's just a testament of where things are. Like, if you have to dig that deep to say that things are good, when clearly everyone is telling you that it's not, and people are worried about the price of groceries, people are worried about how they're going to be able to afford to live, people are worried about their wages not keeping up with the cost of living, how can that be ignored? I mean, I see it all the time in the comment sections of these videos, and I see it reflected in almost every single news story that I cover on this channel. Does that mean that no one out there is doing well and no one has money? No, that's not what it means. what it does mean is that for the majority, that's not the experience people are having right now. So let's talk about the inflation report, okay? The July CPI reading came out and it was at 2.7%, but the expectation was that it was going to be 2.8%. So because it came in a tenth of a percentage point lower, everybody celebrates and says, wow, look at that. This is great. And remember, this is a number that's supposed to be at 3%. And it's actually even worse when you look at the core CPI. That one's at 3.1%. And that was actually above the 3% that was forecasted. So whatever was forecasted on both sides was wrong. And the core inflation ended up being higher than expected. And so, of course, everybody looks at this, especially the stock market, and says, wow, this is amazing. The inflation report didn't come in as hot as expected. So let's rally. This must mean everything's great. Let's keep the market mania going up, right? And we all know that the CPI is not a true reflection of our expenses, you know? I mean, I was just talking to somebody that I know here in California who is a very hard worker. He works 3 jobs, okay? And he thinks by his own estimate, okay, that inflation is up at least 50% across the board with everything that he's had to buy over the past 5 years. And I think all of us can agree with that. In some cases, it might be even higher, depending on where you live and how you live your life. Shelter went up 3.7% year over year. Food costs went up 2.9% year over year. Gas actually went down 9.5%, which is something that I actually agree with. I can see that. Even being here in California, I think this is the cheapest year that I've been coming here with gas prices. Like consistently, I've been paying $4.09 a gallon here. And that has been not bad for California because there's been many times I've came here in the past and prices were much closer to $5 a gallon, if not over that at some point. But take a look at this chart here. There's still a lot of things that are going up in cost quite a bit. You got auto repair up about 11 or 12% year over year. Hospital services about 6.5%. Used vehicles at 5%. Shelter at about 4%. Furniture at about 3%. All items is about 3%. Groceries is about 2.5%. New vehicles is up a little bit. What actually went down? Wine at home, if you can even afford that. Energy, which is a good thing. That's something that we all need, but obviously it didn't go down by much. We're talking, a couple tenths of a percentage point here. And then you had internet service go down about 0.5%. And then you had smartphones apparently went down 15%. I don't know how that's possible because I haven't seen a decline in prices on any smartphone. So how they come up with that number, I have no idea, but that's what it says here. But it's like, even though we've seen gas prices and energy prices come down a little bit, obviously that lowering of prices in that department has been offset by the increased costs for shelter and the increased costs for auto repairs, which is something everybody has to deal with if you have a car. And of course, the medical services. Everybody needs a place to live. Everybody needs groceries. So it doesn't really matter if gas goes down a little bit when everything else is still going up. Ideally, we want to see everything going down. But remember, that's not the Federal Reserve's or the government's goal. Their goal is to just slow inflation down to 2%. They still want prices to continue going up. They want to see this. This is healthy information according to them. Because the moment that prices start going down, actually negative year over year, like the gas prices, for example, that's what's called deflation, and that's the kiss of death when it comes to the way our economy is run, because everything is run on inflation and an ever-increasing debt. So I would not be counting on a day where you're going to see a video here talking about deflation and how much prices on things have actually been coming down. Don't hold your breath for that one. And now after this new inflation report came out, the CME Fed Watch tool that estimates probabilities of the future Fed rate cuts, they're now saying that there's a 90% chance of a rate cut in September at the next Fed meeting, which is up from the previous 80% chance that they were predicting. Now think about that for a minute. Inflation is still much higher than it's supposed to be, 2.7% CPI, 3.1% core inflation, which is what the Fed actually looks at, far above 2%. Why would they actually cut interest rates? What reason would they have to cut rates if inflation numbers are still a full percentage point higher than what they've been aiming for? Does that make any sense? No, right? And the reason it doesn't make any sense is because lowering interest rates at a time when inflation is still too high is going to cause inflation to continue going up even more. There's a cool little beach down here. I'll come back here another day and walk down this beach section. And this most recent inflation report actually puts the core inflation at its highest level since February this year. And somehow they're still predicting a 90% chance that the Fed is going to cut rates in September. I think they're going to be wrong. I don't think that they are going to cut rates in September. I think the FOMC members are going to look at this and say, inflation is still too high. We're going to keep rates exactly where they're at in September. That's my prediction of what I think is going to happen. And think about this for a minute too. We have inflation that's still a major problem, but according to a report from Goldman Sachs, they say that US consumers have actually only absorbed less than a quarter of the tariff costs through the end of June, but they believe that it will jump to 67% of the tariff costs by October, assuming the newer tariffs have the similar impact to previous ones. So even though tariffs do not cause inflation, the money supply increasing is the root cause of inflation. Tariffs do cause prices to go up. So with how bad this reading is on inflation, you can expect prices on everything that the tariffs are going to affect to still continue to rise before the end of the year. Also, another thing to consider is there's been over 800,000 jobs lost since the beginning of 2025, and a lot of the tariffs that are coming are so large that they squeeze profit margins on businesses so hard that it can mean cost-cutting measures are taken by businesses, which include layoffs. So you can expect that the layoff numbers are going to continue to worsen throughout the rest of 2025 as well. Now, speaking of the CPI numbers and how phony they are, consider this as well. This is something that was sent to me by one of my viewers from the website Mishtalk, and it says here that homeowners insurance is actually understated in the CPI, and this is how and why. You have fire and flood insurance completely missing from the CPI, not even understated. And the reason that we know this is because here's a quote directly from the BLS that tracks the CPI. They say, the index includes contents coverage for both renters and homeowners as offered in standardized policies. However, it's important to note that the approach used for owner's equivalent rent excludes certain aspects of homeowners insurance, like coverage for physical damage to the structure and liability, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the BLS says homeowners and tenant insurance index has risen from 152 to 165 since January of 2019. So only a total of an 8.6% increase in homeowners insurance over the past 6.5 years. No big deal, right? That sounds accurate, doesn't it? No, absolutely not. The BLS claims that shelter is 35.473% of the CPI, and of that amount, the tenants and household insurance is allegedly only 0.414%. So if you own a home, the percentage of your income that you're supposedly spending on homeowners insurance is under 0.5%. Keep dreaming, guys. Anybody who believes that number is completely out of their mind. The BLS also does not include insurance in the CPI, as the average person understands insurance. Nor does the BLS include property taxes or home prices directly. And the rationale behind this is because the BLS says these are capital expenses or operating expenses, not consumer expenses. So they're saying that consumer expenses are the only ones that matter, but in the real world, all the expenses matter. In the real world, you have to pay all of the expenses, not just the consumer expenses. And this is how we start discovering that it's all fake, guys. It really is. And I'm so glad that this story was sent to me, because it just really uncovers the truth that the way that they finagle the numbers, the way the CPI is calculated, is proof these books are cooked so heavily that it's never going to show a really bad reading probably ever again. because it's designed not to. And this also kind of perpetuates the lie and the myth that because home prices are up so substantially, that this is a good thing for everybody who owns a house. But in reality, if you own a house, you're paying significantly higher property taxes due to the much higher valuations, and you're paying significantly higher homeowners insurance, both of which expenses have gotten so high that a lot of people can't afford it anymore, and it's one of the main drivers of people selling their homes today. And speaking of how expensive it is to have a home these days when it comes to the property taxes and insurance, let's talk about one more thing, which is an interesting story I saw talking about what it would take to make buying a home affordable again for the middle class. And they have all different types of ideas here. We won't spend too much time on this. We'll just kind of briefly run through this and just kind of see if we can poke any holes in it. They're saying that if mortgage rates were to drop to 6%, that this would be the magic number that people would be flooding back into the market to buy. Because when mortgage rates got close to 6%, like they did last fall, it spiked a buying frenzy. And once the rates got closer to 7, the frenzy stopped. So they're thinking that 6% is going to be the magic number. And notice how they keep raising what the magic number supposedly is. Like before, the magic number was supposed to be 5.5. Now it's supposed to be 6. That's supposed to be the magic number to bring everybody back. But I just did a video last week where even Zillow is admitting that even if 0% mortgage rates were a thing, everybody could get a 0% rate, that still wouldn't be enough to make housing affordable for the vast majority of Americans. So clearly, that's a big fat lie. They say another thing that people could do is just buy tiny homes. Tiny homes are much less expensive, and you don't need as much land, and the cost of the structure is more affordable. Now, obviously, the biggest challenge with this is coming up with the cash to buy it and also being able to put it in a place that allows it because of local zoning laws. So yeah, that is sort of a solution, but not really, because most people don't want that, including me. Nothing against anybody who likes living in a tiny house. It's just not for everybody. They say another thing that could make housing more affordable is baby boomers downsizing and putting up a bunch of homes for sale. That's one I actually agree with, because this is a big demographic shift that's a guaranteed to come in the future. As more baby boomers downsize or pass away, they're going to be passing these homes down to their children, or they're going to be just selling them. And that's going to be a lot of homes hitting the market, which is greatly going to increase inventory, which is going to help put downward pressure on prices. Then they say, well, we could also have subsidies and we could have tax credits. Those are great ideas. So yeah, that's the solution. Let's just throw more money at the problem. Let's give tax credits and subsidies for people to buy homes, because we see how well that worked out with the student loans. You know, college used to be super affordable. Now tuition is at record highs because why? Because of student loans, which is essentially a subsidy to go to college. So that's probably a horrible idea. Another idea, which isn't terrible, but still it's sort of a subsidy, which is that since so many people cannot afford to put 20% down to buy a house, let's give people a tax deduction on the private mortgage interest that they have to pay. So it is just a smaller subsidy. So yeah, after thinking about it for a second, I don't like that idea anymore. Subsidies, no. What about incentives for developers and builders? Especially incentives for them to build homes that are below $300,000 in price, because that's just not profitable for most builders to take on anymore. And that's why they really don't build homes in this price range for the most part, because it's harder for them to make a profit. And since they're for-profit businesses, they need to do what's best for them. I'm against this idea also. Why? Because you're just throwing more money at the problem. It seems like those are the only ideas that government have for the most part, is let's throw money at the issue. And anytime you do that, it just makes the problem exponentially worse. We see it in housing. We see it with the homeless crisis, especially here in California. They spend billions per year on that, and they got more homeless than any other state. You see it with the student loan crisis. They throw money at that. Look what's happening with that. So anything they throw money at isn't going to work. We just know it's going to make things worse. How about property tax reform? That one I actually like. More like property tax elimination would be the best if possible. Something that Florida is looking at, or at least trying to reduce property taxes. So that's an idea I'm definitely not against, but I think we're a long ways away from seeing it play out in any meaningful way nationwide. And then finally, the last thing suggested, which is probably the most common sense one, but good luck making this one happen, is wage increases. If home prices just stayed where they were at and everybody could just get a 50 or 100% raise overnight, then magically homes would become affordable again. But that's never going to happen. You are not going to see a world where people are just going to instantaneously start making all this extra money that they're not making now. And you can't make it mandatory. You can't require people to make this kind of money, because then what you're going to do is you're just going to cause massive inflation and wage price spirals on everything. We'll be right back where we are right now, where nothing is affordable. So I think the best solution is actually for the government and everybody to just stay out of it. Stay out of housing, stop giving subsidies, stop giving any credits, stop giving anything, and just let the market do its thing. Let the inventory come online, let it sit there, let people languish to the point where they need to cut the price, and have the market bounce back to an affordable place on its own. Who would have thought? The most common sense approach is probably the best one. Let me know what you guys think about all this down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here. And I'll see you in the next one.